And so I have to continue. It's a great pleasure to introduce Nora because I've known her for so long. So Nora is known as the professional hobo because she left a professional life as a personal finance expert to become a traveler and a writer and a speaker and a TV host. And she's been traveling as a digital nomad since 2006. And I suspect that was long before the term was coined. Right?
Yes.
You're kind of what are you doing? How can you do this? Really, you can do this? This is amazing. So, but I met her in 2009 at the very first travel blogger meetup in Toronto. There were 4 of us. There's Evelyn Hannon, who founded Journey Woman. Some of you may remember Evelyn. She passed away, sadly. Mary Ellen Ward, who we're hoping to get on because she's an India expert. So we're hoping to get her on. And she runs tours and she has a long-term blog called Breathe, Dream, Go. And then there was Nora, the professional hobo, and me. So Nora has traveled since 2006, maybe a little bit before. You've accumulated a few along the way, but through 66 countries. And given her professional background, you can bet that she did so in a financially responsible way, which I think is important. And so she's got lots of tips for that kind of thing on her site, which is called the Professional Hobo, and it's theprofessionalhobo.com. I've got it right. Yep. Yeah. But today we're talking trains. Nora has a thing for trains and train travel, and she's done some of the most epic train trips in the world, right? Which is pretty cool. She wrote The Ultimate Train Challenge from Lisbon to Saigon in her book, Tales of Trains, where the journey is the destination. And thanks to Nora, that's what we're giving away tonight, is a digital copy of her book to one lucky winner. But most recently, she circumnavigated America by train. And while she usually travels solo, this time she did so with somebody that she'd never met in person, which to me sounds hazardous. but we'll find out about that. So, and we're going to focus on the American trip because that's the one that's more realistic for people to take. But we are going to get into a little bit of her other travels as well. So welcome, Nora.
Janice, it's such a pleasure to be here. It's always a pleasure to connect with you. It was actually, I think it was almost exactly a year ago that I interviewed you for the Remote Work and Travel Show.
That's right.
And that is still one of the more popular videos I have on my YouTube channel, as you imparted all kinds of solo travel bits of wisdom. So it's great to see you again, even though it's only virtual.
Yeah, no, it's great. And that's link number 1 that we must send out to people then. Because of course I give solo travel tips, and so that we will send up in the roundup of this when we set up the link to the video to everyone. So yeah, no, I'm glad you reminded me of that. And yeah, about a year ago. That's amazing. My goodness. Okay, so we want to start with your American trip, but let's start on a really practical level. Mm-hmm. What was the route? Did you go clockwise or counterclockwise? And did you just hit the exterior? Or did you go into the center? Like, what did you do?
So the route it was haphazard in its initial construction of this plan, but it ended up being quite poetic in the end. And what it was I was communicating back and forth with a friend of mine who's also a digital nomad, also a train nut. We were looking at maybe just putting together a little trip, and I'll spare you the minutia, but one thing led to another. And I had this article in front of me that was like the most epic train trips in the States. And I was like, yeah, these 3 are probably on my list of, rides to do. And he said, right, we'll do all 3. And I was like, I was just thinking of doing one, but yeah, I guess that's okay. He said, come on, Nora, you are the professional hobo. This is totally on brand for you. You have to do all 3. And it just so happened that all 3 of these routes connected. So, and they ended up only being the first 3, but I'll get to that in a minute. The first one was the Empire Builder from Chicago to Seattle. The second one was the Coast Starlight from Seattle to LA. Oh, sorry, from Portland to LA. We actually did a little hopper down to Portland, and then Portland to LA. And then the Sunset Limited from LA to New Orleans. And it just so happened that, unfortunately, I couldn't do the Coast Starlight because that ride, that the track had been damaged by fire. So that at the very last minute, we were unable to do. But I made up for that. We still did that. We just had to fly that leg. And I made up for it by going a month later from Florida to New York City. So I still did the circle around the States, and in a few months I plan on making up for lost trains and doing a whole bunch more, but that's going to be another talk, I think.
Wow. Wow. What a great time. Yeah, I've done the Coastal Starlight myself, and it's a magical one because you end up entering LA at sunset over the ocean. It's pretty special. It's pretty special. But yeah, I want to do the one from Chicago to Seattle as well. Yeah, there's so much to do, and train travel I do love. So that's cool. So tell me, how many stops did you like? How many cities did you stop into, and how much time did the whole thing take?
And so each leg, each of these main rides, we did in totality without getting off the train.
Okay.
So the Empire Builder from Chicago to Seattle is 50 hours or something. It's a couple of nights on the train. The Sunset Limited as well is 2 nights and 3 days on the train. So in those legs, that was the trip. It was, and for me, I mean, train travel is as much, I mean, like my book says, it is the journey as much as it is where the journey is the destination. In that, for me, the train ride is not so much a means of getting A to B and much more the experience unto itself for a variety of reasons. And for me, I found myself actually, I was sitting on the Sunset Limited at one point, and I was sitting there doing what I do best on trains, which is gazing out the window and watching the world go by and making up all these interesting stories about the scenery that was going out the window. And I suddenly stopped myself in this moment of utter rapture. And I thought, if I could live on trains, I would. Like, I wanted that moment to go on forever. So you're not wrong when you said I'm a nut about trains. I mean, I'm a little evangelistic, I think, but I do just have this passionate love for just that it's so poetic. It's environmentally friendly. It gives you a better sense of where you're coming from and where you're going, and being able to see the passing landscapes. There's a poetry to what you're seeing out the window, because, train tracks are not where people face. People face the street. They often face the other way. So what you're seeing is kind of a backdoor inside scoop of the places and the countries and the cities and the landscapes that you're visiting. So I find that kind of, I don't know, voyeuristically insightful as well.
Yeah, no, I have this image in my head of going. It was south of Portland, and it was like not a dump, but there, like, it was very, very industrial, and it was just so fascinating to see. Like, this is how the town functions. This is what makes the town viable, right? As opposed to the pretty stuff on the main street. Right. So, and you do see the pretty stuff as well. You see lots of, but it's so diverse what you can see from a train. It's very different. Yeah.
It's funny. You mentioned the dump. So when I was on the Sunset Limited, there was this. I'm going through these like miles and miles, days, hours of this beautiful desert, this red, rich soil, and these green cacti, and mountains in the distance, and this epic colored skies and sunsets. But for a period of time that felt like it had to be at least an hour. Like, I don't know how many miles I went by. I was looking out, and right beside the tracks, maybe 10 feet, 20 feet off the track, was this ditch. And this ditch was probably 10 feet wide, maybe 15 feet wide, and it just ran the length of the tracks. And in this ditch were all these rusted out cars. And I can, my imagination went wild for how all those cars, they're like, why is this here in the middle of nowhere? No roads. There's this ditch with all these rusted out cars. So of course I'm making up all these great stories for where these cars might have come from. But those are some of the quirky experiences that you can have on trains and you can run with.
Did you ever find out?
I did not. I did not, because nobody on the train knew either.
Wow, that's crazy stuff. That's really so. Okay, so we've got what the routes were. How much time? How many days did the whole trip take?
So we definitely took lots of time in between. So had you done it straight through, you probably could have done it in, I guess, about a week and a half, if you really wanted to just do nothing but the trains. But of course, the beauty of a trip like this is being able to see various ports of call, as you would. So, after spending a few days in Chicago, then spent a day in Seattle, spent about 4 days in Portland, another 3 or 4 in LA, and then a week in New Orleans. And then that was when my travel partner and I parted company, and I went to Florida to stay with a friend for like a month, and then finished off the trip by going from Florida to New York City. So one of the beautiful things about being a digital nomad and being location independent, and you don't even have to be a digital nomad to take advantage of this. If you are location independent and you work remotely, you have the ability to travel for much longer periods of time. And in fact, actually, I would actually go so far as to say it's downright necessary, because if you are working, as I was through this entire trip, you need to be able to build in the time to be able to get your work done, as well as the time to be able to discover the destination that's on your doorstep every night when you close your laptop for the day. Right. So we built lots of time in to make sure that we had a decent balance of working as well as enjoying all these new amazing destinations.
Right. So Chicago, Seattle, Portland, LA, New Orleans.
New Orleans.
Okay, so you had 5 stops. So if you were stayed 2 nights in each, there's 10 days, say, plus your 8 to 10 days. So it's about 20 days to do it without being too pressed.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, that's very cool. So, okay, what was it like on board the train? What was sleeping like? What kind of did you get kind of berth? What kind of accommodation was it? How did you handle that?
I have all kinds of practical tips in this realm, because one of the first things that people said to me before I did this trip was, "Are you crazy? Do you know this is Amtrak? Right? Like, this is, it's not like the trains in Europe, And I said, yeah, actually, I do know. And a lot of these routes that Amtrak offers are actually quite amazing, and they can be quite luxurious if you know how to do them. And the trick is in getting sleeper class. And there's a couple of different kinds of sleeper class you can get. You can get a roomette, which is 2 seats that face each other during the day, and then they fold down into a bed at night, and then another bed comes out from the top. So it's like two single bunk beds. There's a bedroom, which has a slightly different layout, still 2 single bunk beds, but they're oriented a bit differently, and you have a lot more room, and you have a private bathroom in your cabin. And then there's the family bedroom, which is a bunch more bunks and certainly a lot more space. So my travel partner and I booked a roomette, thinking, this is going to work out great. And we boarded the Empire Builder in Chicago, and we could not even fit our bodies and luggage into this room at one time. I mean, it was so small. We were sitting in these seats, literally knee to knee. We already had to do this anatomical Tetris to get our luggage in, and we both travel quite light. So that was a shocker. And we immediately thought that we made a big mistake. Like, unless you're really super intimate with somebody, I would suggest getting a bedroom and not a roomette. Because it was really difficult for us to maneuver. So we immediately got on the phone and we're like, we need an upgrade. And unfortunately for the Empire Builder, we couldn't upgrade. But we worked it out. We figured out how to, one person would, go to the bathroom in terms of getting to bed, for example, the bedtime routine. One person would go to the bathroom while the other is finding their luggage and changing and getting into bed. And then the other person would come in. But it was, listen, I'm an able-bodied individual. I consider myself to be pretty flexible. I don't know how anybody without, years of yoga training could get into this upper bunk. So I will say, as a solo traveler, the roomette is amazing, because when I went from Florida to New York City, I did that on my own, and I did it in the roomette, and it was fabulous. It's a perfect size for one person. It's cramped for 2. You better know them pretty well. But all of those forms of sleeper class also come with the benefit of meals. You have, first of all, you're in a separate part of the train. Then you have access to the dining car, which provides 3 meals a day, white linen table service. There's a chef making meals, bespoke meals. I mean, there's a menu, but you order from the menu. They bring it to you. It's good food. And you can get a glass of wine with dinner or whatever alcoholic beverage of your choice. And then, of course, there's also a lounge car with an observation deck that both coach and sleeper class passengers can access. So while you will be spending a lot of money on sleeper class, it is also important to note and remember that you are getting a lie flat bed for the night, and you're getting 3 meals a day, both lunch and dinner being 2 or 3 course meals. So nobody does it because it's cheap. I'll tell you that right off the bat. But it's, if you think of it as hotel meals and transportation, it's a little more justifiable.
Right. Right. About what price point is it?
Well, it depends. Because the earlier you can get your tickets, the less you will spend. Right. So we got these at the very last minute. Don't recommend that, right? But after being locked down in Toronto for 16 months, I would have paid any amount of money to have a travel adventure. So I did do that. So all of that was in the neighborhood of $3,000 for both of us. So it was a lot, but we did it very last minute. We literally ordered these tickets a week before we left.
Right, right.
So I'm looking at, to give you a little more context there, I'm looking at doing another trip that will be equally, if not longer, that will be Seattle to Sacramento to Chicago on the California Zephyr, which is the most expensive train that Amtrak has, and then another train down to New Orleans. So again, it's going to be 5 to 6 nights on trains, but because I'm looking at doing this way in advance, a roomette for all of those trains will be $1,000. So again, 6 nights of accommodation, 18 meals, $1,000. So yeah, that's a little easier to swallow.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Tracy, do we have questions?
I have a few interesting comments that people are making. And Suzanne said that it's interesting what you're saying about the roomette, because it sort of confirms her idea that it'd be fine for one person, which that's how most of us here travel, but not so good for 2. And Rosa, who's done a lot of Amtrak trips, says that the roomette is really lovely for one person, but the only downside is that you only have a view of that side from that side of the train, because there's another roomette on the other side, so you can't see across the train. She also suggested that they have senior rates and rates for veterans, so to always ask if you might belong to a group that they provide discounts for. I have a question from Janet, who's curious, and this is interesting. She's curious how you get your daily exercise if you're traveling on a train for such a long stretch.
It's an excellent question, and certainly one that I fielded quite a few times from people who kind of looked at me with horror of, how do you get your exercise if you're on the train for days at a time? Basically, the way that you can get exercise if you're doing a straight run, as I did all of these rides, there are regular stops, and the train will stop. They will let you know, the conductors advise you if the stop is long enough for you to be able to get off the train and stretch your legs. So because some of those stops can be up to a couple of hours long, they definitely let you know, sometimes 15 or 20 minutes. So if I knew that it was going to be a short period of time and I was nervous that the train would leave without me, then I would just get off the train and go up and down the platform a bunch of times, get the blood flowing. I knew it was a little bit longer, as it was in San Antonio, as an example, we were there for a few hours. I took a walk around town and enjoyed that experience as well. So you definitely can get out as long as you are aware when the stops are, and you can get a little bit of exercise. I did get my steps in. I'm all about the pedometers. I got my steps in every day, even though I was on the train all that time. So where there's a will, there is a way.
Very cool. Tracy, anything else?
That's it for the moment.
That's it for the moment. Okay. So you covered the food and the sleeping scenario. That's interesting. You know, it's been a long time since I've taken, because I did the what do they call it? The city of New Orleans, from Chicago to New Orleans, and I'd forgotten that the food was included. So it's really good to know. So Nora, what was the one stop, the one city that you visited that you really found it was your best?
You know, it would have.
Or the route that of the 4 that you did, what was the route like? So let's go both ways.
Okay, good one. My favorite route by far was the Sunset Limited from LA to New Orleans. The scenery was absolutely amazing. And yeah, by that point, I'd really found a groove as well. The Empire Builder is nice, but it doesn't really, you go through a lot of mediocre looking landscapes until you hit Big Sky and the mountains in Montana. And then it gets spectacular. I mean, it goes from to, oh my God, very quickly. So, but the Sunset Limited for me was just amazing, but also too, because I'm from Canada, the desert landscape is exotic to me. So that was all very, very new and refreshing and amazing to see, but also too, even how it changes, you know, following along the border with Mexico. That was kind of an interesting experience on a variety of different levels. I think I saw the wall and that it looked weird, but I don't know. It wasn't what I expected it to look like. And then all the way through Texas, which of course is a gigantic state that most people can't wrap their head around, myself included. So that was definitely my favorite ride. In terms of my favorite stop, it would be a tie between Chicago and New Orleans. Both of them were new cities to me. I hadn't been to them before. Chicago, of course, is just absolutely gorgeous Art Deco city. There's a lot going on there. And of course, this was my first, again, after 16 months of being locked down, this was my break free. So, I mean, I could have gone to, you know, a much less exciting place and it probably would have felt great. Because I always say that travel is contextual. You know, your favorite destination in the world has so much more to do with how you're feeling, what you're doing, and who you're with than it does the destination itself. So Chicago was amazing. I don't think anyone would argue that it isn't an amazing city, but it was like extra amazing for me just because of the context of the trip. New Orleans, I mean, again, somewhere that I'd always wanted to visit. I love music. Both my parents are musicians. My dad is a jazz musician. So, I mean, obviously the New Orleans jazz was, but unfortunately, I was unable to really take advantage of New Orleans in the way that I wanted to, because by the time we got there, Delta was a thing. And in an effort to be safe and responsible, I personally made decisions that not everybody around me was making, in terms of I wouldn't eat indoors. So I would only eat at restaurants that had patios. That also precluded me from visiting pretty much every jazz club I could find because they were all indoor environments. So, and I stayed away from crowds. So Bourbon Street, obviously, even though it was actually quite crowded, was not a place that I steered clear of it. So my experience of New Orleans, I'm going to need to do a redo at some point when we're a little more able to experience things safely for everybody.
Yeah, I can imagine. That would have been very frustrating, but you know, we all have to know what our risk tolerance is and our, you know, what our concerns are, and we have to follow our, you know, our beliefs and you know ourselves and act accordingly. Yeah. Were there any interesting people that you met along the way that kind of stand out?
You know, one of the interesting things about train travel, it's a great question, Dennis, because I don't know if you've experienced this, but in my experience, anyone who takes a train, especially one of these long distance trains, you know, like I said, it's not cheap, it's not fast, and it's only moderately convenient. So everybody who's on the train has an interesting reason and a story for being there. And that inherently makes everybody very interesting to me. So I have all kinds of amazing conversations in the lounge car with people. The kind of the first interesting scene was there were these people, this group of young gentlemen, and they had to be, I don't know, early 20s at the latest. And they all looked the same. They were all dressed in these blue shirts with these black vests and black pants, and they all had these haircuts that like monk-ish haircuts, except they were missing the, they had hair up here. But other than that, they had these really abrupt haircuts. And they were all speaking this language that I could not discern. Like I'm usually pretty good at being able to figure out where a language of what. I had no idea what language these guys were speaking. And they played cards all the time in the lounge. They were always there. So finally, at one point, I just looked over to them and I forgot what the conversation was, what the first question was. It might have been, what language are they speaking? And they were all very shy. The fact that someone was talking to them was, first of all, like, ooh. And finally, they kind of, non-verbally elected a spokesperson who then turned to us and said, Pennsylvania Dutch. And I said, well, what's the significance of your clothes? And again, they looked at me like I was from the moon, like, what do you mean? What's the significance of our clothes? And I'm like, you all look the same. And they said, well, this is just the way the people from our town dress. And I said, well, why are you on the train? And they said, this is our first trip anywhere. We are visiting some relatives who are in another state. So this was their first time traveling anywhere, and they chose this train trip. And there was very little other conversation that happened with them, again, because they were just really like painfully shy, really kept to themselves. And I didn't want to make them any more uncomfortable. I'd already made them with these questions. But of course, I did a little more research into Dutch and what was that. And so that's a story unto itself. But that was just one example of the kind of characters that you can find on trains. I also really love talking to the staff on trains. For whatever reason, I do tend to endear myself to them. Perhaps it's, some of the train rides I've done because I'm a journalist and they know I'm a journalist. So they automatically are predisposed to answering any questions I have, of which inevitably there are many. But then also too, I find, even if that's not the case, I find that people who work on trains 9 times out of 10 are really passionate about their jobs. And they really ultimately enjoy the trains as much as the passengers do. And it's really nice because it's a long trip over a few days. You have a chance to actually get to know them a little better. So those are just a few little experiences, but definitely you will always, and as a solo traveler, I've always maintained that it's easier to meet people as a solo traveler. You are not only more approachable, but then it also is incumbent upon us to reach out to other people. And on a train, it's very easy to do. You're sitting there for interminable periods of time. And in a lounge car, an observation car, you're often sitting next to various groups of people. So you can quietly, voyeuristically observe and overhear other conversations. It's kind of a guilty pleasure, I will admit, I do this. But then you can also actually engage people in conversations and learn a lot and make some friends along the way.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And I don't think I mentioned at the beginning that you typically travel solo. It's just that this trip you were with someone. But yeah, I have met so many interesting characters on train trips. One was, but I have to say it. I met a father and son duo from northern BC who were traveling from Toronto back to their hometown after having been on the Dragon's Den to promote their plain pine box, which was a coffin that would be a bookshelf, in your house normally, that can convert into a coffin. It's like, can you get more quirky?
That's awesome.
And the funny thing is that they did their routine from the Dragon's Den for the whole car. And yes, one of the lines for the son, who was the main spokesperson, was says, "Yes, Dad, come out of the box," right? So yeah, no, the people you meet on trains, it's wild. And you're right, they're passionate. They're doing this for a reason. It's not convenient. It's not fast. It's not the most luxurious. And for that reason, they're there, for other reasons that make them interesting. Yeah. No, I just so relate to all of this. It's kind of like, oh yes, that's right. I need to go and take a train.
I have a couple of questions. This is going back to when you were describing the cost of one of the legs of your trip. And Ellen is wondering if, when you said $1,000 for 6 days, if that was the cost for a solo traveler, if that was sort of the per person double rate.
That would have been for a solo traveler in a roomette. Now, if you had a second person traveling with you, it would not be double the cost, because basically the way the price breakdown works is you pay for your passage. So each person has their own cost, and then there's one fee for the roomette. So it would be, I don't know exactly how much more it would be for a second person, but it would be way less than double.
Okay. And Terry was asking about, I assume this is related to sleeping, what the noise levels were like and the steadiness of the trains.
It varies dramatically. It depends on where you are. Sometimes it depends on the track gauge, which can vary, although in the States it might be the same. But also the quality of the track, that can change things. There is a white noise that for me is quite comforting. It's kind of a lull of the train as it is going. But then you will also hear the horn, sometimes the horn of the train that you're on, depending on whether you're at the front or the back. So you'll hear that as it approaches all the crossings. But generally for me, I don't find the noise to be bothersome or cumbersome. As for the canter and sway of the train, it is an art, learning to walk on trains. It's a thing. So, if your sense of balance is leaving a little bit to be desired when you are on flat and non-moving ground, you may be challenged on the trains, but there's always also something to hang on to, and go slow. So just make sure you have steady footing all along the way, and you will be okay. I definitely get into a groove when I'm on trains, and I enjoy it too. Like once I know I've been on for a while, when I've got that, like, I got this, I can just dance along, I make every stumble look intentional. And you can open the doors as well, like, because inevitably if you're going in between cars, as you will on an Amtrak train, which is very long, going back and forth to the dining car or the cafe car as an example, there are handles. So you push a button to open the door. There are always handles for you to hang on to make sure your passage between cars is safe. So there's not really a lot that you can, if you're going to bump into something, it's going to be a wall or a door most of the time. So it's not too bad.
Okay. And Karen wonders, when you get off at a stop to sort of visit the town or just to go for a walk, is it like a hotel room where you just lock your door and go?
You don't lock your door. They don't give you a key. So there is a certain element of trust when you're leaving your things in your room, in your roomette or your bedroom, even if, while you're going to dinner or going to the lounge car or getting off the train. You are leaving yourself open to someone else opening the door. And for me as a solo traveler, I am really super uber travel security centric. I'm all about knowing where everything is all the time and having all the pertinent pieces on me at all times. And so there is a little bit of a leap of faith in leaving my stuff in my room and trusting, that there is an honor system here and that everyone has stuff in their rooms that they are leaving when they are at meals and whatnot. What you can do though is you can pull the curtain that is in front of the door, because it's a glass sliding door. So you can pull the curtain in front of that so that nobody can see inside the room, which means they also cannot see if anybody is in the room. So chances are somebody is not going to just open the door and march into your room if they don't know who is in there and what's happening. So you can also lock them from the inside, but you cannot lock them from the outside.
Okay. And Kathleen wonders how the Wi-Fi is.
Non-existent.
Okay.
It's not entirely true. There will be Wi-Fi at stations, and depending on the route, there can be some Wi-Fi on the train, but certainly don't count on it if you're looking to get any work done. For me, I had a data SIM card, so I was just able to tether my laptop to my phone that had global data, and I got my work done that way.
Okay. And Richard raises had an interesting comment. This is something that might warrant a little investigation, as the question of just how much track work is planned for the immediate future if Congress passes the infrastructure bill. He says a sizable amount of money will go to the railroads. If it does, it might affect train travel planning, but I'm guessing Amtrak will be very proactive in dispensing all available information to minimize inconvenience. And Rosa added that she would love it if the government would invest some money into upgrading the train system, because Amtrak is not exactly state of the art.
It is, yeah, you're right. Amtrak is not exactly state of the art. However, they have been remodeling their trains. But this is the system. I think the money that's being invested is not so much in the trains themselves, but in the infrastructure they are in. So in expanding tracks. One of the things that happens with Amtrak, this happens in many countries, Canada included, is passenger trains play second fiddle to freight trains. So there's just one track, right? So if there is a freight train that needs to pass that's coming the other way, then the passenger train has to pull off to a side bit of track, and there's at regular intervals there are side tracks. The passenger train has to pull off to the side and wait for the freight train to pass and then get back onto the track. Well, the problem is, depending on how far apart those side tracks are and how fast or slow the freight train, I feel like I'm doing one of those elementary school math questions. If a train is coming at Tuesday at 60 miles an hour, you might be waiting. You could be waiting for a very long time as well. You could even be waiting for hours. So definitely, again, if you're looking to arrive at a station when Amtrak says you are going to arrive, you may be disappointed. So my arrival into New Orleans, I think, was 5 hours late. It happens. So definitely be ready to roll with those punches. In regards to the planned infrastructure, the track work that is being done and how that will affect the routes, yeah, I'd like to think that Amtrak will be proactive in, making sure that passenger trains aren't affected by this work. So they, maybe if a section of track will be closed, obviously they won't sell tickets for trains on those particular times. However, I will say, so I'm going to share a little story with you. This is I am not sponsored by Amtrak, and I think this story is going to prove that. In that the Coast Starlight, I told you that ride I couldn't do. And it was because the fires in California had destroyed a section of track. Now, I knew about this before the trip happened, and I looked online, I saw that their existing trains had been canceled at that time. So I called Amtrak. I said, hey, I have a ticket in 2 weeks or thereabouts for the Coast Starlight. Is the track going to be repaired by then? And they said, oh, yeah, no problem. It's going to be repaired by July 3rd or whatever it was, it was a date that was shortly before my trip was supposed to happen. Fast forward to Chicago, when I'm knee to knee with my travel partner in the Vermont thinking, oh my God, what have we done? And on the phone to Amtrak and trying to upgrade on the Empire Builder, found out we couldn't upgrade that one. We did upgrade the Sunset Limited. But while I was like, well, I have you guys on the phone, the Coast Starlight, are you back up and going now? And she said, well, no, didn't you get the email? No, what was the email? Oh, well, we've changed your itinerary. You're going to take a train. You're going to take a train from Portland to Sacramento. You're going to get off the train at 11 o'clock at night or 1 in the morning, and you're going to take an overnight bus to whatever the next place was, where you're going to be able to pick up the train again and continue on to LA. And I said, oh, no, that's not on at all. And they said, well, we've upgraded you to a bedroom for both of your train legs, and we're refunding you $150. And I said, no, we did not pay exorbitantly to take an overnight bus. That's not on. And to Amtrak's credit, I mean, so I was dismayed that I was never alerted to this itinerary change. And had I not called in, I might have found myself at the last minute at the mercy of this itinerary. But then once I did find out about this, to Amtrak's credit, they refunded the full amount with no questions asked. So.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it when you call in and that's when you discover something's changed. That's happened to me before as well. Tracy, anything else?
That's it for the moment.
That's it for the moment. Okay. So I guess I mean, you've given us so much insight into what it's like to travel on Amtrak on these routes and the like. Before we leave this trip, is there anything else that we should know? Just, one of those things like that it would be helpful to know.
Absolutely. And that is, so all of these Western routes that I did, like I said, had the linen table service with the chef making the meals on the plates with the forks and knives and glasses, and it was lovely. And then I got on the Silver Meteor from Florida to New York City, and there was no linen table service. There were meals, but you had to go to the cafe car and with your selection. So there was a menu, but it was airplane food. So it was prepackaged, microwaved, and then I also really try as much as I can not to generate single-use waste on a trip. So I was extra dismayed to have, it was just a meal in a plastic, wrapped in plastic, in a cardboard thing on a plastic plate with a plate. It was just like, oh no. So I asked the staff, I said, whoa, what's the deal with these meals? And they said, well, actually a couple of years ago, prior to the pandemic, presumably for budget reasons, Amtrak had cut the meal service on all of their trains. And this was what all of their trains were offering. My understanding is also that they were charging less for tickets, which now in retrospect would explain why my ticket from Florida to New York City cost a lot less than the other routes did. And only shortly before I did this trip had they reinstated the full meal service on those other routes. Presumably, they will reinstate full meal service on the eastern routes as well. But it definitely is worth checking. And you will be able to see on the site, if you look on the site, there's a place where, once you're digging into the information of your route in particular, there are places where you can look at the meals and you can see if it's cafe service, that's not the full meal service. If there's another full dining card. So you can definitely ascertain through the website, but if you have any doubt, I highly recommend you contact Amtrak, because for me, the dining car is a huge part of the overnight train experience. That is where I have the most interesting conversations. Why? Because almost always when you are eating in a dining car, you will be seated with other passengers, because there are not enough, there's the few things actually, and here this leads into my second tip, which is the real killer tip. But there are multiple seatings for the meals, because they cannot fit all the sleeper passengers into the dining car at one time, nor can they give all of the passengers their own tables. So you're going to be seated with other people, and it usually is a fairly informal basis. It just depends on who's sitting there when you get in there. And that is an immediate, when you're having a meal now with somebody, you're going to get to know them. And that is where, when I'm breaking bread around dinner tables around the world, on a train or otherwise, this is where connection is made for me. And the train is no exception to that. So the dining car is a huge part of the experience for me, which is why I was so disappointed on that last leg to not have that level of service. My killer tip, if you will, is because there are multiple seatings for each meal, I always choose the last seating, because then I'm not pressured to eat my meal and get out of the train to make room for the next seating. I can enjoy the meal. I can enjoy the company of the people I'm with, and inevitably, there's always at least one time on the train where that will just languish into like a full evening. Sometimes, I mean, on the Empire Builder on the first night, there was like 3 tables, and we all ended up combining our tables and talking, and we were there for hours. I mean, we closed down the dining car that night. So if you choose the last sitting and you enjoy connecting with people in that kind of way, then you'll have that opportunity.
That's a good tip.
Yeah.
That's a very good tip, because you're right. The dining car is a wonderful opportunity to meet people. Yeah. Tracy, I think you've got something else.
I have a couple questions to try and squeeze in here. This will be a quick one. Do you buy your tickets on the Amtrak website, or is there another or better way to get them?
So yes, I buy them through the website if at all possible. because then you have the ability to, if you need to make any alterations to your trip, you can do so on the website as well. And I say that with full knowledge because the first itinerary, for whatever reason, there was something that wasn't working well on the website. So that those first 3 train trips, I had to book over the phone. And so you can, if you don't want to book it on a website, you can book it over the phone. That is very possible, and they're very helpful once you eventually get through to them. Unfortunately, you could be waiting a while. But then if you've made a reservation over the phone, you cannot edit that reservation online. So that's something to be aware of.
Okay. Who did you use for your mobile data service?
Oh, that's a whole other session. But I have, as a Canadian, there's a certain mobile phone hack. I actually spend literally for all of my telecommunications needs around the world, including my home phone number, which works everywhere around the world. I pay less than $200 a year. And that includes global data and the phone and all the things. Like I said, this is the travel hack extraordinaire, but it is just for Canadians. However, if you're looking for a global data SIM card, the one that I use and that works for anybody is by a company called Flexiroam. But they are certainly not the only one. I also recommend KeepGo. They have mobile hotspots and international data SIM cards. It's great. It's a SIM card. You throw it into your phone, you turn off your home phone plan, and then you can just load this data. You can either go with a monthly plan or you can just load it as you need it. And depending on how much data you're buying and what plan it is and what companies it's with, you can average about or even less than $8 to $10 US per gigabyte. So it's not bad.
Okay. Terry is asking for you to repeat those, but Terry, we'll put this in the email that we send out afterwards. We'll get all these, we'll get links, and titles and things and send them out to everybody tomorrow. Janet is wondering, and this is a good question. She says she loves train travel, but does it make sense during COVID right now, especially for older travelers?
A really good question. So Amtrak is taking all the precautions they possibly can, but of course, when you are, a train is an indoor environment. So basically, when I was on the trip, this was last summer. This was before Delta had shown its ugly head. So the policy was you had to wear a mask on the train at all times, unless you were eating and drinking, or unless you are in your cabin with the door closed. However, that still means that you're going to eat and drink at some point, and that means your mask is going to be off, and that also means that other people are going to be in that situation where their masks are going to be off. And if that makes you uncomfortable, then I would suggest that you wait to take that dream train trip. So it's a personal comfort level for anybody at this stage of the game. I will say that Amtrak was pretty. They were really attentive to making people wear their masks. There was no way of times about that. If you didn't wear your mask, you would be kicked off the train, full stop. But again, there are times then when the masks come off. So it really all depends on your personal comfort level.
Yeah. David said a friend of his recently took a West Coast route and found that they had to eat in their rooms, that the observation car was closed, the snack bar car was closed. So it was, some of those things, as you were saying, where the fun happens, those opportunities weren't available.
And that would have been during one of the peak waves where they just had to change their terms. So yeah, if you're looking at booking that dream trip and you want to make sure beyond a shadow of a doubt that you're going to be able to take advantage of the full deal, then it would be best to wait.
Okay, now here we go. If you had to pick one other country for train travel, just one, what would it be?
Oh, really? Just one? I've done it in like 27 countries, right? All right. Oh, well, I really had some epic train experiences in Australia. There are a few long distance luxury train trips. The GAN goes from Adelaide to Darwin to Adelaide. The Indian Pacific goes from Sydney to Perth. So both of them are basically, cutting through the whole country. The Indian Pacific in particular goes to the Malabar, which is the world's longest section of isolated track and desert. And So it was really quite amazing. And the thing I like about those trains as well is they had what you call whistle stops. So they actually have stops. So it is a package deal when you get on this train, but the train is it has scheduled stops that it makes, and all the passengers get off the train. You can do whatever you want when you get off the train, but they have organized events like activities and stuff that you can sign up for if you're so inclined. So you can take advantage of those stops in between. So it's kind of an all-inclusive deal in that sense, which is really rewarding. And I did a lot of trains in Australia, including 11,000 kilometers in 11 days straight, all to see if it's possible to get bored on a train. Spoiler alert, I wrote a book, so I didn't get bored. So that's a great country to do an amazing train trip. I also did, if you really, really want to splurge, I did the Deccan Odyssey in India. And this particular route went from, it goes from Delhi to Mumbai. I picked it up in Jaipur to Mumbai. And this is super uber duper crazy luxury train travel. I mean, there is all the things on the train. There's like a spa on the train, there's a gym, there's a library, there's full, I mean, they cater. I have my own butler. And again, the activities are, I mean, all you have to do really is just, follow along, if you will. And they plan these amazing activities, like really special things that are just, as a regular traveler, you would not even have been able to have these kinds of experiences. So it's kind of like a cruise, except on a train style. But like I said, that is the people that I spoke to on that train, again, were just fabulous and really interesting, and everybody had their own reasons for being there. But that again was the destination, and it was a bucket list thing for many people. So save your pennies.
A spa and a butler, that sounds like the way I was destined to travel.
Right?
I think that's all the questions we have at the moment. Although interestingly, a couple other people answered the question about, what one country would you travel in? And Switzerland and Scotland came up.
Both good choices. Very much. Yeah. Switzerland in particular, I mean, the scenery is incredible. And, pursuant to my earlier thing about trains not running on time, especially if it's a long distance, that ain't going to happen in Switzerland. I mean, it is on time. So yeah, if you like punctuality, Switzerland's a good place. But the scenery, oh my God. I mean, there's so many beautiful train rides in Switzerland.
Yeah. I lived there for about 6 months. So yes, I agree. But you can miss your train because they leave on time.
Yeah, they're not waiting for you.
No, that's for sure. Oh my goodness. You have provided so much information, and we didn't even get to most of your other trips. And there have been many, many epic ones. But we're going to give away to one of our attendees here, one of your book about which trip is this about?
So my book, Tales of Trains, Where the Journey is to the Destination, covers all of my Australian train trips that I did over the course of a month. It also covers the Ultimate Train Challenge, which was 30 days from Lisbon to Saigon, all by train, which was at the time the longest possible train route you could take in the world. So it definitely covers a lot of trains and a lot of countries. And again, just the narrative experience thereof.
That's so great. Okay, Tracy, you know how to run this. Go for it.
Yes. So I asked Nora to pick a number between 1 and 100 before we started. So if everybody wants to type a number between 1 and 100 into the chat, the person who comes closest to it without going over will win the book.
Yes, that's going over. I didn't realize that's a new element to this, I think.
Well, it occurred to me the last time that we did this, that if I had, one person who was one behind and one who was one ahead, how would I figure it out?
Hence the evolution of the game.
Yes.
Okay.
So let's see.
Did anyone nail it?
No. But we've got someone close, I think.
Okay. I believe the winner is Kathleen. Am I right?
Yep.
Yes. So Kathleen, we will get this to you. I will send an email to you and Nora introducing you, and Nora will get her book to you. Congratulations.
And as a consolation prize for anyone else who is watching or listening to this, I would like to offer a free gift to anyone who would like it. And what it is, my specialty, of course, is in long-term travel, and planning for long-term travel is no easy feat. So I have made a checklist of 10 things you must do before you travel term. And this will help you arrange your affairs and make sure that you cover all your bases so you can travel stress-free and effectively. All you have to do is visit theprofessionalhobo.com/free gift. One word, free gift.
There you go. We'll be sending that link out as well. So that'll be good. Oh, Nora, it has been so much fun and such a pleasure. And wow, I think you've got everyone ramped up for the trip, which is just great. Where else can they follow you? You've got your YouTube, let's have it, all the places that they can follow you.
All right, so my online home, and generally the best place to start your journey and down the rabbit hole of the Professional Hobo, is theprofessionalhobo.com. You will find on that links to all of my social channels as well as my YouTube channel. However, if you want to go straight to YouTube and find me there, you can just look for Nora Dunn, and you will find me. youtube.com/Nora Dunn. You'll find about 15 years of content, which includes a lot of different things, including a video playlist of my Ultimate Train Challenge experience. So you will actually see from beginning to end what it's like, including the Trans-Siberian, which was, I did straight 153 hours straight on a train from Moscow to Beijing. So that was kind of interesting. Yeah, but definitely start at theprofessionalhobo.com and see where the site takes you. Could go in a lot of different directions.
That's right, for sure. Nora, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who joined us tonight, and we'll get that email out with a link to the video as well as all of the things that we discussed tonight. So that's a wrap, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. It's been a great